Marilyn is one of the outstanding women of America. Her speeches are consistently followed by standing ovation. She changes people's lives. While a student at the University of Colorado, she was elected Miss America. After that busy year, she returned to college and graduated with Phi Beta Kappa honors. She has been the hostess of 23 network television specials. Although television was exciting, she felt a need to express her own ideas and embarked on a career in public speaking. She has since been selected as the Outstanding Woman Speaker of America. She is the president of her own company, which distributes VHS and DVDs throughout North America. Currently, Marilyn addresses an average of 10,000 people a week at local, state, and national meetings and conventions. And now, her message.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Vanderver. During the past 16 years, I've devoted the major portion of my time to addressing adult and youth conventions on motivational topics. The more I become involved with people, the more I begin to realize the need there is to talk about, think about, discuss ideas that relate to our personal lives. For example, if I asked you if you consider yourself to be a success or a failure, how would you answer? Well, let me tell you just a little bit about 3 other people and ask you to guess which you think they probably were in their chosen fields, a success or a failure. Number 1, he ran for political office 7 times and was defeated each time. Number 2, she wanted to be a performer. She went to drama school in New York. After several months, the school wrote her mother that she had no acting ability at all. They said, take her home. Number 3, he wanted to publish a children's book. It was rejected by publishers 54 times. Were the 3 of them failures in their chosen fields? Let me share with you some interesting facts. On page 286 in one of our major encyclopedias, there is an outline of Abraham Lincoln's life. Let me give you an example of what it says. Early life, search for a career, success in politics, congressman, return to law, re-entry into politics, the debates with Douglas, election as President of the United States in 1860. Now let me give you some facts about Abraham Lincoln that were not listed in the outline of his life. 1832, lost job, defeated for legislature. 1833, failed in business. 1834, elected to legislature. 1835, sweetheart died. 1836, nervous breakdown. During the next 24 years, he was elected only once to Congress, and yet he was defeated for Speaker, defeated for nomination of Congress, defeated for Senate, defeated for nomination of Vice President, again defeated for Senate. 7 political defeats. Really 9 failures out of 11 tries. Was Abraham Lincoln a success or a failure? A winner or a loser? He was both. She wanted to be a performer. She went to drama school in New York. After several months, the school wrote her mother that she had no acting ability at all. They said, take her home. In 1953, 29 million people watched Eisenhower's inauguration as President of the United States on television. 33 million people watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth on television, and 40 million people watched one episode of I Love Lucy. When the very first I Love Lucy show went on the air, in 1951, it was rated one of the country's top 10. At the end of 20 shows, it was the #1 show and remained the #1 show for 5 years. It's still on TV in reruns. Lucille Ball lived in Jamestown, New York. She knew as a child she wanted to be a performer, and so at age 16, with her mother's permission, she went to New York City to a drama school. They said she had no acting ability at all and asked her mother to take her home. But how could she go home? She had told everyone in Jamestown she was going to be an actress. So she auditioned as a Ziegfeld showgirl and was hired without pay for 4 weeks of rehearsal. She was fired before the opening night. She rehearsed with 3 other big musicals, and each time was similarly fired. She hadn't earned 1 penny. After 2 years with no success, she found a job as a model. Then she caught pneumonia and had severe pains in both legs. The doctor said there was a possibility she would never walk again. She went to the hospital as a charity case and then home to bed in Jamestown. She remained in bed for many months, then on crutches, then on a cane. She had to wear 20-pound weights in her shoes. It was 2 years before she was well again. She first went to New York at age 16. She returned to New York at age 22. There isn't time to go into the rest of her struggles to become an entertainer. The only reason I use the example at all is because I believe some people believe that one day a Hollywood agent saw Lucille Ball and said, "You're going to be the funniest, the best-loved comedian in America," and it just did not happen that way. How old do you think Lucille Ball was when the very first I Love Lucy show went on the air? She was 40 years old. How old do you think she was when her first child, Lucy Arnaz, was born? She was 40 years old. Is Lucille Ball a success or a failure? If you read her fascinating life story, you will find she has been both a success and a failure. He wanted to write and illustrate children's books, but he just drew so differently than the other students. At the end of his first high school art class, his teacher said, "You'll never learn to draw, Theodore. Why don't you just skip this class for the rest of the term?" But in his late 20s, he decided to write and illustrate that children's book, but it was turned down 54 times by different publishers. A friend of his at Vanguard Press decided to take a chance, and at age 33, Ted Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, had his first book, And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, published. It has sold over 300,000 copies. He's written 38 other books. This has always been my favorite. They're never very thick, but it takes him an average of a year to write one, and he estimates that he writes and draws more than 1,000 pages for every 64 pages that are finally used in each book. Is it possible that sometimes the difference between success and failure is trying just a little harder, trying one more publisher, studying 20 minutes longer, interviewing for a job just one more time? Could it be that the difference between success and failure could be trying just one more time? She wanted to be a leader. When she ran for the president of her college class, she lost. She ran for the Texas legislature and lost. 2 years later, she ran again and lost. 2 years later, Barbara Jordan ran for the Texas Senate and won, becoming the first black senator in 100 years. When she later ran for the United States House of Representatives, she was elected by an overwhelming majority. She electrified America with her keynote speech to the Democratic National Convention.
But there is something different about tonight. There is something special about tonight. What is different? What is special? I, Barbara Jordan, am a keynote speaker. When a lot of years passed since 1832, and during that time it would have been most unusual for any national political party to ask Barbara Jordan to deliver a keynote address. But tonight, here I am. And I feel that notwithstanding the past, that my presence here is one additional bit of evidence that the American dream need not forever be deferred.
She said, "I didn't get where I am by being black or a woman. I got here by working hard. My parents taught me that you get what is due you if you just keep after it. If it doesn't come, then maybe the time isn't right. Maybe some other time it will be right." Have you ever run for an office, lost, and then decided you weren't meant to be a leader? John F. Kennedy was one of 35 to run for the president of his freshman class in college. He was eliminated on the first ballot. President Gerald Ford ran for the president of his high school class and lost. President Jimmy Carter ran for the governor of Georgia and was defeated. Have you ever failed a grade or a course, or were not able to get into the college of your choice, or for any number of reasons didn't graduate, and so deep in the back of your mind, you think of yourself as not as intelligent as those who did? Edward Gibson wanted to excel in science or engineering when he grew up. He flunked first and fourth grades. He went on to become one of 3 astronauts in the Skylab 3 mission. 1,492 men applied for this assignment. 6 were chosen, 3 went on the mission, and Edward Gibson, who had flunked first and fourth grades, was one of them. Bobby Kennedy flunked 3rd grade. Jerry Brown wanted to be a lawyer, but flunked the bar exam, took it again, passed, and went on to become the governor of California. Winston Churchill, England's most famous prime minister and military leader, failed 3 times in his exams to enter the military academy. Albert Einstein, perhaps the greatest scientist of all time, failed the entrance exam when he tried to enroll in an institute of technology. Were these people successes or failures? Winners or losers? They were both. But when they were failures or losers, they didn't quit. Has the same been true in your life? In trying to solve a problem, she tried 487 experiments, all of which failed. This was Madame Curie, the woman scientist who isolated radium. Let me tell you what she said when her 487th experiment failed. She and her husband Pierre had been trying to isolate radium. He threw up his hands. He said, "It will never be done. Maybe in 100 years, but never in our day." She replied, "If it takes 100 years, it will be a pity, but I will not cease working for it as long as I live." Now, I don't know whether she isolated radium on the 500th try or on the 600th try, but I do know that she was a failure for at least 487 times before she was successful. He wanted to be an outstanding businessman. He wanted to own his own candy store. At 19, he tried to operate his own candy shop. It failed. He went to New York and tried to manufacture candy. That failed too. At age 46, he built the largest candy factory in the world. His name, Milton S. Hershey. There probably isn't anyone who hasn't eaten a Hershey candy bar. As a child, Eugene Orowitz was short, skinny, and unpopular. He was from a different religious background than other children, and they called him names. But what humiliated him is that he wet his bed. As a teenager, he was so embarrassed about his bedwetting that it even affected his grades. He graduated 299th out of a class of 301, third from last. Eugene Orowitz later changed his name to Michael Landon. He couldn't help the bedwetting, but his mother thought he did it to punish her. So she would hang his sheet out the window to punish and humiliate him. She became even angrier, knowing he didn't, when he spent the night at a friend's house. She didn't know he would sit up all night, sometimes slapping himself so he wouldn't fall asleep. He was 14 years old before it stopped. When Michael Landon was 22, his father, who had watched his shame and humiliation, said, "Son, I was a teenage bedwetter too." He said, "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he tell me when I was 14? So I wouldn't have felt so alone." Years later, when he decided to make a film about a teenage bedwetter who went on to become an Olympic champion, he needed a stadium filled with 70 to 80,000 people to cheer this boy on to his victory. Phone call after phone call to football team owners left him with the same answer: "There is no possible way I can give you a halftime during a televised professional football game to let you stage your race." But when he called Carol Rosenblum, the owner of the Los Angeles Rams, he was amazed when he said, "Sure, Michael. Just tell me what you need, and I'll have it for you." They talked for more than an hour, and then just as they were saying goodbye, Mr. Rosenblum said, Oh, by the way, Michael, I was a teenage bedwetter, too. His goal, his dream, was to win the gold medal in the decathlon in the Olympics. He placed only 10th at the Olympic Games in Munich after 4 years of intensive training. Bruce Jenner won the gold medal in the Montreal Olympics in the decathlon. And her goal was to win a gold medal in the 1972 Olympic Games in the women's downhill skiing event. She came in second. She trained with grueling intensity and dedication for the 1976 Olympics, but dropped out to care for her father, who was very ill. He died several weeks after the Olympics. Her quest for the goal of her life had been interrupted by a more important priority: to sit at her father's bedside for the weeks and months before his death. Anna Marie Moser-Prohl once again began training for the 1980 Olympics. She had been training for the Olympics for 12 years, skiing with all of her heart, energy, skill, and enthusiasm, and with a picture of her father stitched into the lining of her skin-tight suit. Anna Marie won the Olympic gold medal and claimed the dream of her life. She wanted to write a newspaper column as a financial advisor, but no newspaper or magazine would use a woman for this influential position. So for the first 7 years, her daily column in the New York Post appeared under the name of S.F. Porter. Today, Sylvia Porter has written 7 books, and her Sylvia Porter columns are published in 450 newspapers throughout the world. His father always told him he was a no-good bum. He was born in a ghetto in Dallas, slept in one bed with his 2 brothers, and lived in a very tough neighborhood. He was skinny, scared, and was beaten up regularly by other children. He was only 7 when he had a nervous breakdown. It was 2 years before he could leave his bed and be coaxed back to school. Today, Aaron Spelling is one of television's top producers, having produced such shows as Charlie's Angels, Love Boat, Vegas, Fantasy Island, Family, and Heart to Heart. In fact, he has produced more primetime shows than MGM, 20th Century Fox, Columbia Pictures, and Warner Brothers combined. He wanted to be a writer. Never in 8 years of writing did he have one single article accepted for publication. He had literally hundreds of rejection slips. At age 37, all he had was 18 cents in his pocket and 2 cans of sardines to eat. Alex Haley was a cook in the Coast Guard for 20 years. He said it was so boring and lonely being on a ship that he began writing lots of letters. Soon crew members began asking him to write letters for them, particularly love letters. The first time he considered writing for a living, he took a book he was reading and began copying it word for word. He began to realize that each word must have a reason. Alex Haley spent 12 years researching and writing Roots. He was 55 when it was published. It became one of the best-selling books of all time. Is Alex Haley a winner or a loser? A success or a failure? He has been both, but when he was losing and when he was failing, he never quit. She wanted to be a comedian, but Carol Burnett's childhood was anything but funny. Both her father and her mother were alcoholics. She lived with her grandmother in a rundown one-room apartment where the bed pulled down out of the wall and stayed there. Their glasses were old peanut butter and jelly jars. Her closet was the bathroom shower rack. She said, I was too embarrassed to ever let a boy into our apartment. I would always wait in the lobby and say, my grandmother isn't feeling well. She once said, I don't think you can be truly funny unless you have had suffering. He wanted to be an outstanding businessman. At age 52, he had been selling milkshake mixers for years, which had put him $100,000 in debt. His other jobs included selling paper cups for 17 years, playing the piano in a nightclub, and selling real estate in Florida. He had diabetes, arthritis, had lost his gallbladder, and most of his thyroid gland. One day this man went in to see a drive-in restaurant that was using so many of his mixers they could make 48 milkshakes at one time. He was so impressed. He persuaded them to let him franchise the same drive-in in other cities. Ray Kroc keeping the name of that first restaurant, opened his first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois, at age 52. There are now more than 6,000 McDonald's in the United States and 21 other countries. His failures, his illnesses, the fact that he was $100,000 in debt and 52 years old never kept him from seeking and accomplishing the goal of his life, that of being an outstanding businessman. In the spring of 1980, she stood in an auditorium so packed with college students, many were lining the walls. You could almost feel the air of electric excitement as she looked at her audience from left to right and said, "My mother is a deaf mute. I do not know who my father was or is. The first job I ever had was as a cotton picker, and I stand before you this day, the treasurer of the United States of America. My name is Azie Taylor Morton. Nobody has to remain the way they are if that's not the way they want to be, because it isn't luck, and it isn't circumstances, and it isn't being born that way that makes your dream come true. The next time you're tempted to think, luck, can't do it, take out a dollar bill and look at my signature and say, if she can do it, so can I." In sports, he struck out 1,330 times in baseball. This baseball player held the world's record for striking out. No one had ever struck out more times than he did. 1,330 times he walked up to the plate, swung with all his might, hit the air, and then took that humiliating long walk back to the bench. But this baseball player also held another world record. Until Henry Aaron, no one had ever hit more home runs than Babe Ruth, 714 home runs, and yet he also held the record for striking out. But who remembers the fact that he failed almost twice as many times as he succeeded? He wanted a sketch and cartoon. He applied for a job with a Kansas City newspaper. After looking at his work, the editor said, "To be frank with you, it's easy to see from these sketches that you have no talent." This boy was crushed because that's all he wanted to do, sketch and cartoon. He went from studio to studio, always being turned down. Finally, he got a job drawing publicity material for a church. He couldn't afford an office, so he rented an old, dilapidated garage. It was infested with mice. As he would sketch, the mice would run back and forth as he tried to concentrate. 30 years later, Walt Disney was famous, and so was one of the mice. I'd like to conclude this theme with one final thought. I believe it's possible to be a success in failure. How would it be possible to succeed if you lost? Peter Strudwick is a marathon runner. A marathon is 26.2 miles. He has never won a race, but he is a winner in every sense of the word. He was born with no right hand, and his left hand has only a thumb and one finger. And he was born with no feet. His legs end in stumps. He started running seriously at the age of 39. He said, "I've lost every race I've entered, but I'll never be a loser. I'll be out there running for as many years as I can, and if in my last race the mountain is too steep to run, I'll jog it, and if I can't jog, I'll walk. And if I can't walk, I'll crawl on all fours. And when I can no longer crawl, I'll shout words of fire and glory to those around me." Yes, Peter is a winner. Failure is never trying. Failure is quitting. Jerry Traylor ran in the Denver Marathon. Jerry has cerebral palsy, but he ran 26.2 miles on crutches. Many athletic, healthy, strong men and women never finished that race, but Jerry did. When he fell, he just picked himself back up and kept on running. Did he win? No. The winner ran the marathon in 2 hours and 25 minutes. It took Jerry 7 hours, 14 minutes, and 38 seconds to complete the 26.2 miles. He came in 864th. Last. Is Jerry a winner? You bet. Winning is total effort and involvement. Failure is never trying. Failure is quitting when you aren't doing well. How many of you will never finish a race or school or a project because you aren't doing well? How many of you will never even participate in athletics, civic events, committees because you would never want to embarrass yourself or fail? What are you counting in your life? Your successes or your failures? Are you not going to try for something because you did once and you didn't make it? Are you not going to try because you are afraid to fail? You will decide what your life is going to be. You can remain shy, mediocre, and apathetic. You can quit and just let the world go by. Or you can find the way to accomplish something that is important to you. I'm not suggesting that you should go out and try to win an election or a race or a title. I'm not suggesting that success is being famous or a movie star or a governor. I just hope that sometime, somewhere, there was something that you wanted to accomplish, and if you didn't, you'll just think about these examples. Everyone is both a success and a failure in a lifetime. If you have ever thought about yourself as a failure in anything, I only hope you will reconsider what is success, what is failure, and remember that in the final analysis, you alone will decide which you will be.